So guys, I did something. Stay tuned to find out. See if you notice. At this point, I put the manifold on the turbo. There's no gaskets on here right now. I just want to mount it on the engine. Intake. I hear it. That sounds so good. Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. For those of you that are new, this is my base model 8th gen Civic turbocharged with the eBay kit. I've been running this about 6,000 miles and I'm always fingling around with it. And just recently I had an idea. Idea in my head to change the intake mass airflow sensor location, and that's exactly what we did. There are two types of mass airflow sensor setups on boosted applications. One is a pass-through mass airflow sensor, and one is a blow-by or blow-through mass airflow sensor. And what that means is the flow-through setup is when you place your mass airflow sensor housing before it goes in the turbo. So during this process, it's actually taking vacuum and monitoring the air coming in as vacuum into the turbo that goes to the engine. That has some pros and cons as well, and a lot of modern day cars use this kind of setup. Another setup is the blow-through design, and that's once it already goes through your intake to the turbo, goes through the intercooler piping, and it goes in your charge pipe right before the throttle body. So this is exactly right here is where I had my mass airflow sensor located for the entire build. It was a blow-through setup. That's the research I did on the vehicle when I first started this build, and that was the best location. But I thought I'd give it another try, and I'd swap it to a different setup here, the flow-through setup. And I've been driving it around for a day using Hyundai, doing a lot of logging, and I have some results for you guys. And once we get back into the studio there, I'll bring up the graph on Hyundai and we'll explain more detailed which setup works better for my application. A lot of modern day cars, they actually use the mass airflow sensor to read the air, and the mass airflow sensor directly controls the amount of fuel the injectors and everything brings into the motor. And when you're using a setup like this with the mass airflow sensor in the intake, you got to make sure there is no leaks post mass airflow sensor, because that will skew your results. Also, once it reads the air coming in, it's almost impossible to run a blow-off valve like this that's not recirculating. This is atmospheric. It just vents it out to the atmosphere. In a setup like this where your mass airflow sensor is reading the data, you want to recirculate the air that it's already read back into the intake somewhere past the sensor, because it already calculated how much air went in, and it doesn't want you to vent it to atmosphere like this setup. This setup though, it's okay to do it with this mass airflow sensor because this is not controlling my air fuel ratios. This is only taking data of the intake air temperature, and for my automatic transmission, this affects my shifting. If I disable this sensor in Hyundai, my shifting is absolute junk. And that's another reason why I wanted to mess around with the location of the sensor to see how my shifting would be in the transmission, since it is automatic. So the fueling on this vehicle is strictly affected by the manifold absolute pressure sensor, which is located back there. That is what affects the fueling, and that's what checks how much boost is going in the motor. So this essentially, on this application, it's fine to run it pre-turbo even with a atmospheric blow-off valve, because again, the numbers here that it monitors as far as airflow doesn't affect the actual fueling of the vehicle. But like I said, in any other application where it is using fueling on the mass airflow, you will not be able to run an atmospheric blow-off valve. And an atmospheric blow-off valve is the absolute freaking best thing your ears will ever hear. So one issue I've had with this car is a P0103 check engine light code, and that check engine light code, what it means is there's too much airflow for the mass airflow sensor to read. So it reads on pretty much from like 1 to 5 volt range, and when it's in this mass airflow sensor housing that was provided with the turbo kit, which I believe is like a 2.25 inch pipe, that pipe is actually too small, and the velocity of air going through that small pipe creates just a high signal on the sensor and makes me go into limp mode. So whether the sensor was here, it was causing the check engine light under high boost, and now that I switched it over here, it's still causing a check engine light under high boost. So eventually what I'm planning on doing is probably putting a bigger mass airflow sensor housing right in this side. Yes, we're going to go back to blow through design. We're going to put probably a 2.5 to 2.75 inch mass airflow sensor, and hopefully that can eliminate that P0103 code, because again, it doesn't hit all the time, but if I run open downpipe and my boost pressure rises because there's no restriction in the exhaust, I can pretty much trigger that check engine light in like top of second gear, definitely in third gear. So it's kind of annoying if I'm really beating on the car. And I think since it's going to be a new season here, we just did the compression test and leak down test. The leak down test showed everything was okay with the motor. So I think we're going to keep going with this build and keep checking out what we can improve. So definitely mass airflow sensor housing is going to go over here, which is bigger. We're going to make those connections. And actually that intake being pushed back all the way there, you see there's some coolant lines here. It's actually generating a lot of heat over there. My intake air temperatures, I'll show you guys through the logs, are a lot higher than they were before when I had the intake just sitting right over here. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to show you guys with the build and the setup I changed. Again, pass-through design is on the intake going to the turbo. Blow-through design is in the charge pipe before the throttle body. And let's head back to the studio and check out the data. All right, guys, we're back in the home studio setup, and we got some charts pulled up. Right over here is the new setup that I just swapped over. This is the pass-through mass airflow sensor design, and on the bottom you can see the RPMs, and as the RPMs climb, that voltage signal raises up as well. And you can see right around here, around already 5,000 RPMs, it is approaching that 5-volt signal, which again, driving the car with the pass-through mass airflow sensor, I noticed it was going into limp mode faster. And as you can see, around 5,000, I'm already maxing out that mass airflow sensor. So 3 to 4 seconds in that 5-volt range, it will trigger that check engine light, that P0103 code. Now, the second example here I'm going to show you is the blow-through design that I had. And as you can see, at 5,000, we're still approaching that 5, but we are able to reach close to 6,000. We gained 1,000 more RPMs that we can easily rev the car out to before it starts creeping up to that 5-volt range. So statistically speaking, the blow-through design, oddly enough, was better for the vehicle. I would think with the blow-through design, with the boost pressure, it would see more voltage, but I am wrong. The blow-through design was better. And looking at the intake air temperatures and everything through both setups, the old setup would run a little cooler, Now I know I'm not running a cold air intake or anything. It's pretty much a short ramp, so I'm gonna be getting warmer air through the intake regardless. But the setup I had before, which I'll probably show you guys that are new in the video here somewhere, how the intake looked like before, where I had it placed. And now obviously you see where the intake is. It's a little further by the firewall, but there's some coolant lines there, so it's picking up probably a lot of the heat from the coolant, and it's not as easily accessible as the cold air is coming through the engine because it's all the way in the back, that filter. So hopefully you guys learned something from this video. It's a big thing when trying to set up your car for a boosted application to choose pass-through mass airflow sensor, blow-through mass airflow sensor. Now again, to sum everything up, if you want to run atmospheric blow-off valve, blow-through is the best way to go. If you guys want to run the mass airflow sensor in pre-turbo as pass-through, and you're using the mass airflow sensor for your air-fuel ratios and your fueling, you definitely have to recirculate the excreted air that the blow-off excretes. So definitely consider all that. Again, every application is going to be a little bit different. This is my application. This is my personal first-hand experience in a pretty rare turbo 8th gen Civic. I mean, I've seen them here and there, but not to the extent on YouTube, and there's not much information out there. So hopefully you guys appreciate this content. If you're gonna try to build your own 8th gen Civic, well, check out the 8th gen Civic R18 playlist I have on my channel, because everything you need to know, all the problems I've ran into trying to boost this thing and get it to where it is, have been documented. Also, one thing I do want to mention, I used to have a boost spike issue with the blow-through setup. See, this is the car trying to shift gear from first to second. 7 pounds of boost right over here during the shift. Right before the shift, you can see it's steadily at 5 point, in the 5s. So about 2 psi spike during shifts. Sometimes, depending what gear I'm shifting, I'll hit my boost cut, which is at 7.9 psi. I thought the pass-through filter style design would eliminate some of this boost spike during shifting, but it has not resolved that issue. That is still ongoing with the automatic transmission. Alright guys, I'll catch everyone on the next video. Thanks for watching. Peace.
I ain't here for the money, I ain't here for the fame. Though it might be nice to own a jet plane, I'ma do it all for you. Come along and see it's true.